Good evening, my dear students. This is Sir Mark speaking. Can you hear me where you sit? If you can hear me, can you give me some sign, a thumbs up or something? Ronald, can you hear me? What about A10? Mr. B. Lightlu, can you hear me? Mr. B. Lightlu, can you hear me? Nute Nohro is trying to join. We'll have to wait. Mr. B. Lightlu, can you hear us? Can you speak, Ronald? Can you put the microphone? There is a mute button there to your bottom left. Just click on that. It should not be muted. Yes, Ronald. Hello, Ronald.
Hi, sir.
Yes, we can hear you. Good to see you. How about B. Lightlua? Can you unmute yourself, B. Lightlua? We cannot hear you yet. Mr. B. Lightlua? Mr. B. Lightlua? How about Nute Nufro? We can only hear Mr. H.C. Ronald. Bain not Lopaki Nufro. Can you see us? Can you hear us? Mr. B. Lightlua, can you hear us? B. Lightlua? B. Lightlua, I think your phone is unmuted. Can you unmute yourself? Can you hear us, Mr. B. Lightlua? Click the join audio button. B. Lightlua? Mr. B. Lightlua, can you hear us? Did you click the join button? Good evening, Mr. Jehovah. Can you hear us? Jehovah? Jehu? Did you click audio? Jehu, can you hear us? Mr. B. Lightlu, can you hear us? Mr. B. Lightlu? Ronald, are you still there?
Yes. Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, very good. Okay, I think we should be able to hear. Jehu, have you finished? Do you hear us? Yeah. You can almost start. Yes. B. Lightlu, can you hear us? Mr. B. Lightlu, can you hear us? Mr. B. Lightlu, can you hear us? Okay, Mr. B. Lightlu, you can hear me? Right. Can you nod your head if you hear me, Mr. B. Lightlu? How about Jehu? Yes. Jehu, can you hear me? How about Nute Nofro? Okay. I think the rest of you, you go to YouTube, except for Ronald. I think that way it will be better. Looks like you got poor, right? Uh, yes, Jehu, can you hear me? Jehu, Jehu, can you hear me? Jehu, can you hear me? Speak. Very, very good. How about Mr. B. Lightlu? Can you hear me? Mr. B. Lightlu? Yeah, it's difficult for Mr. B. Lightlu. Yes, Jehu can stay. Yes. So can you still hear me, Ronald?
Yes.
Very good. Who else can hear me except for Ronald? Can anybody else hear me? All right. Your signals are very bad, but as long as Ronald is here, it's okay. Let us start. Yes, we can hear you. Who is this? Who is this IG? Yes. Who is this man? Start your video. Who is this man? I think this is Jehu. All right. Now we can start. We're going to have to mute you. Jehu, can you hear me? Jehu? Very good. I can hear Ronald also. Right, Ronald? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, very
Yes.
good. We'll start now. Okay, so I'll mute you, both of you, for a while so that I don't have any background noise. We'll have to start. Okay. All right. Ronald, good evening.
Good evening.
We're going to start now the evolution of standard English. And I'm very glad that you join tonight. I hope some of your friends will also join from YouTube. This is a very important class, and Before before I move on and start, I want to say that first of all, I gave the assignment to you, and I hope you got the assignments. Have you gotten it? Did you see the assignment, Ronald?
Yes.
All right. How about Jehu? Jehu, did you see the assignment?
Before.
All right. Very good. So if you saw the assignment, I want you to complete tonight or maybe tomorrow early morning because tomorrow is the last day. Okay. And this assignment is primarily on chapter 8, the evolution of standard English. Okay. So let's start by talking about the evolution of standard English. And we're going to learn what is standard English. Okay, what is standard English? That's what we're going to learn tonight and how it evolved. Okay, so I suppose you can see my screen. Can you see the screen, Ronald? Ronald, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Very good. So tonight we have chapter 8 of the evolution of standard English. And in the past, we learned that there were the different ages of English language uh, development. First, we come to the Anglo-Saxon period, the Middle English period, and so on and so forth. And now we're going to start, come in brief, the various stages where we have English. So first of all, what is standard English? That is the question. What is standard English? When we say the word standard English, many people say there is no standard English. And many people do not like the idea. They say there is no standard English. If you say standard English, that means you have one English for pronunciation, for grammar, for style, and for different ways. But so they do not accept it. And so there's a lot of controversy, a lot of criticism about forming the idea of standard English. And those who disapprove of having this standard English, they say that standard English point to a large to a language which is theoretical rather than real. It is theoretical, but there is no real standard English. And they say that each person, every individual person has its own brand of English to be standard. And so all deviations from it are to be treated as either affectations or dialects. Okay, so they say that it is not possible to form a standard English, right? And so they there are so many people who do not like the idea of having a standard English. They say it is impossible. Okay, now let's move on. The idea is, as I said, disapproved. Is disapproved because it should not be approved. This is disapproved. Okay, because they say it is theoretical only and it is not real, and there's a lot of disagreement, and they say words and phrases are different for individual persons, so you cannot have standard English, right? But according to your text, let's try to define what is standard English. Okay, your textbook in your textbook, Mr. F.T. Wood said that standard English is there. It existed, and we know, and we can recognize it. We can detect deviations from it, so we know that there is a standard English, and we can know if there is any other English that does not conform to this. And in this, there is also room for variation, meaning difference. And there's always a personal and local coloring. And he also says that educated person aims for this standard English. we know that it exists. Okay. However, Mr. F.T. Wood does not say exactly what is standard English. He said that standard English is something that we know. It is a very broad framework. Okay. Now on page, I think page number 151, we have Professor H.C. Wild. He said standard English is a type of English spoken within certain social boundaries with extraordinary degree of uniformity all over the country. When he said the country, he meant England. Okay, so he says well within social boundaries. Okay, so spoken within certain social boundaries. Now this boundary, he said, of course, is the educated people and people who are middle class or upper middle class people. Okay, so he says there is an extraordinary degree of uniformity in pronunciation, in grammar, and in style, and in vocabulary usage. So that's what Professor H.C. Wild said. Again, if you look at F.T. Wood and H.C. Wild, Professor H.C. Wild, they could not really pinpoint. Let's go to the third definition by Professor Daniel Jones. He's another very important authority. He said that this is the English that is heard usually in everyday speech of Southern England, whose members have been educated at the good schools, the great public schools. Okay, so now Professor Daniel Jones has made it a little bit more localized. He pinpointed the geography of where standard English is spoken. He said it is heard in the everyday speech of Southern England, where people usually use that language, and there are families living in the southern part of England, and these people normally they went to good schools such as the great public schools, which are reputed schools. So the type of English spoken by these people is called standard English. Okay, so that is according to Professor Daniel Jones. Now, I want you to think about this again. Let me think about, I want you to think about the evolution once again. If we go from the Old English period, you remember, it started from somewhere from 600 AD or maybe a little more. These dates are just roughly put. None of the scholars would agree. We have Ronald. You still remember Wessex, right, Ronald?
Yes. Yes.
So Wessex, why? Why do we say Wessex in the Old English period?
Because they are more cultured and they are economically stable.
Yes, very good. Thank you, Ronald. So the Old English period also, it was divided into little kingdoms, and Wessex, the dialect of Wessex was the most predominant dialect used. And because the area, the region around Wessex, West section is more politically stable, and the people are, as you said rightly, cultured, and there's a lot more activity going on. And so, and even authors of that era, they wrote extensively in that dialect. And you remember, especially the king, Alfred the Great, who was the one, Alfred the Great was the king who really introduced literature, and he also laid down his arms and took up a translation himself. Is even asking his subjects to read more books. All right. So Alfred the Great was really responsible for this English. So this English, it continued to go on into the Middle English period. I'm not sure you can see the screen. Jehu, can you see the screen? Jehu?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Jehu?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. So as you can see from the screen, we go from the Old English period where the Wessex dialect became very predominant, and into the Middle English period that ranged from 1066 AD to 1500 AD. There we have the East Midland dialect, which is most predominant. And this East Midland dialect, people like Chaucer, these great author, a great poet, he was the champion of these East Midland dialect. And a very important thing is, as you can see from the screen, Caxton. Caxton was the one who brought the printing press in England in 1476. Since it was localized in that East Midland area, and he established the printing press there. So the authors and the writers who wrote in the East Midland dialect, they have advantage over other dialects of other kingdoms. So more and more of the East Midland dialect literature and books and printing had been published and circulated very widely. So this Middle English period, East Midland dialect, is also the precursor of Standard English. All right. So from Old English, Wessex, to East Midland dialect, to Modern English, and ultimately the Standard English. So there's a long line of continuity starting from the Old English period. All right. Ronald, is it clear so far?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Very good. All right. Now I'm going to turn off the screen sharing, and I'm going to go more. So those are the very important things that first you have to realize. There's a continuity. It goes on. All right. And let's go on. During the the Reformation era. Let's go over. Remember, from the Middle English period, we go to the Reformation era. Okay, the Reformation era. That is maybe the 17th century. Oh, the Commonwealth. During the Commonwealth period, a lot of things have also happened. Now, just before the Commonwealth period, let's move a little closer to the Middle English period. Now, in 1589, remember the time, 1589, even very important person, George Pudenham, in his Art of English Poesy, he wrote that, as you can see from page number 152, he says that, "Ye shall take the usual speech of the court and that of London, and that the shires lying about London within 60 miles, not much above." He says that George Pudenham, he said that the best English, or the standard English, or the correct way of speaking and writing and grammar as a whole is to be found in England only within London and 60 miles area of London. Okay, Ronald, is that okay? He said if you go north of 60 miles of London, then they're going to speak different dialect. You won't understand. Their grammar is bad. Their words are not so cultured. So you don't have to take that. So the English that you need to speak should be within London and 60 miles of London, the little towns and hamlets in that area. Those are the only correct English. That's what Mr. George Putnam said in 1589. Okay, so now you can understand why this East Midland dialect later on, and also it's become very prestigious. During that time also, the people themselves, the authors themselves, they value the languages around London, which is basically the south of England, of course. So they think that they are more cultured, and the English that they spoke there is the standard English. Okay, so that's what he wrote. And now, coming to the Commonwealth period. The Commonwealth period is a time of Oliver Cromwell. We haven't really started with but I think with myself, with other teachers, I think you have studied the Commonwealth period. So during the Commonwealth period, the Puritans were predominantly the groups in the society that basically ruled. They run the civil conduct of the English society. They were very religious people. And according to Mr. F.T. Wood, he said during the Commonwealth period, the Puritans, these religious groups who are so enthusiastic about the Bible and faith. They were the protector of good English. That's what he said. Okay. All right, Mr. Jehu. So I think you can find
Okay.
the page number 153 with the note that I distributed. You can find that, certain things that I underlined also. So the Puritans were very important because they were the protector of good English. They were the one who helped maintain standard English. Why? Because they studied the Bible extensively, and during the Restoration or Reformation, during those times, there were a lot of upheaval in society and a lot of permissiveness and lots of influences and lots of worldliness the years before. And they didn't like this. These Puritans, they didn't like this. And the English language itself also stand a chance of being disrupted and polluted by influences from different uh, parts of the world because of these Renaissance and other things. Even though it has its benefits also, but it has its negatives also, because English is also very stand a chance of losing its originality, authenticity, or its basic foundation. So the English language also stand a chance of being polluted, and the Puritans were very, very important in protecting the English language, and which we ultimately embrace today. Okay, so this is something that Mr. FT would mention here, and I think I even asked this one, I think, in your assignment. All right, so as it says here, as their religious and moral outlook influenced the English life, and through right up to the end of Queen Victoria's reign, so did the character of the speech influence the future development of the language. So religious people, Puritans, were very important in maintaining the purity or for the evolution of standard English. All right, that is something that you have to understand. Okay, now let's go over to the uh, 18th century. All right, we're going century by century. In the 18th century, uh, there is a tendency by authors and writers. Here, things are a little different now, because during this century, people like Alexander Pope, they really wanted English to be fixed. All right, remember there's a classical revival here in this century, and people were writing in verse and rhymes, and that was so classical, that was so structured and measured, and then they want their poems and their writings to be formally correct. And people insist on having a correct and good and best English, and they want to really standardize, we use the term standardize English language. All right, and so they work very hard, they tried very hard, people like Pope, as I mentioned. But FT Wood said here that these people were wrong to believe that Latin and Greek, the language that the classical people really followed, okay, Latin and Greek, the old antiquity of old antiquity, olden period, Latin and Greek. Remember, in the 17th century, there is a revival, there is a new awakening, there is a liking, there is a affection, new affection for all these Latin and Greek culture of the past. And so they wanted to write their poems and their literature based on them. Okay, so they tried very, very hard to maintain and to have a rule, strict rules and regulations for English language. However, this is really not going to be successful. They tried very hard. All right. But it is going to be very difficult. All right. So they couldn't do that. Now, the next 100 years was a age of individualism and the doctrine of evolution. And in the next 100 years, there's scientific achievements already. The doctrine of laissez-faire, the doctrines of evolution, and also survival of the fittest. All these things in science also came into being, and these are the things that would affect the English language also, right? Now, in the 19th century, uh, we begin to see that there's a lot of change going on. The great period of English expansion of empire building in the 19th century, Britain became very rich now, became more adventurous, and became more colonial. So they took to their ship and go to different islands and nations to conquer the world. All right. So during that time, uh, there's a lot of things going on already, and this is the time in which the Victorians also uh, emerge as a literary movement. So that's why we call it the Victorian era. Also, in the 19th century, uh, the Victorian authors, novelists came into being, and there were, of course, a large chunk of essays and poets. These Victorians, however, according to Mr. F.T. Wood, had one very important asset to maintain the purity and the integrity of the English language, or the standard English, which again is very religious in nature. It is the Bible, okay? During the 19th century, a lot of things happened in science and technology, and especially in trade and commerce and British imperialism. However, we have the Bible, and many Victorian novelists and authors and writers, they prioritize and privilege the writing style of the Bible. Okay, so the Bible is becoming a very important mm, a textbook for scholars. The Bible, the way English is written, they call it one of the best books to copy, to emulate in the style and in the structuring of the words, and even in certain phrases. Even today, so many English phrases that we use actually came from the Bible. So many phrases, right? So many idioms and phrases that we use in common parlance. They all owe it to the Bible. Okay, so many writers like Ruskin was steeped and saturated in its style and phraseology. Okay, so the Bible became influential not only for its religious significance, but for its literary significance. So what we can say now is the Bible also has become very important for the development of standard English. Okay, okay, Mr. Ronald, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you still following me? All right. How about Jehu? Are you still following me? Can you hear it?
Okay.
All right, very good. So now you know the Bible is very important for you. For the development of English language. Now, the movement during this century also, the movement toward a purer English, purer means more filtered, better English. The movement, the going, people wanted pure English still, is seen most markedly in Alfred Tennyson, the poet, all right, the poet laureate of England. Alfred Tennyson, he wanted good English, he wanted best English, he wanted pure English. Remember, he's a sort of a nationalist because he doesn't want his English to be influenced by French and Latin and Greek and German and other languages that came to be accepted in English. He doesn't really like that idea. That's why Alfred Tennyson, when he wrote his poems, he wanted to use original Anglo-Saxon word as much as possible. Okay, so this is something that you have to know. Alfred Tennyson, so he does not like foreign words, words of foreign origin. In fact, in some of his writings, Morte the author, he would use the least amount of Germanic words. So now there is another person who went even further than Alfred Tennyson. His name is William Morris. All right, Ronald, can you see William Morris?
Which page?
Yeah, William Morris, page number 156. You can see his name. So he is more radical than Alfred Tennyson. He said that he wanted to use even archaic words that were not used anymore. If as long as it is of Anglo-Saxon origin or English origin, he wanted to use it. He doesn't want to use any other languages that came to be accepted in English, foreign words. That's why he used word like instead of omnibus, he wanted to use folkswing. Instead of dictionary, he wanted to use word book. So such is the radicality of William Morris. Now, if you read down below, you can see he's not successful. You know, these people are also, in a way, linguistically ultra nationalists. Okay, Tennyson and William Morris. All right. Now, let's go over to we're talking about the Victorian era. That's 19th century, and we're going to be over now. Of recent years, page number 157. Page number 157, we also saw that there is a rise of something called standard reaction against standard English. There is a rise of a concept called U and non-U English. Okay. So what does U stand for? U stand for upper class or aristocracy, or non-U stand for non-upper class. Okay. So in this, what it meant here is that many people were against dividing the English language into upper class English and lower class English. So they revolted against this idea. They don't want this idea. They want to throw it away. They say English is English. Why should you speak like a RP? Why would you consider received English, RP for short, as superior to any other forms of English or dialect? So there is a debate going on. All right. So U stands for upper class, and U stand for non-upper class. So that concept is also there, and people started really attacking that idea. It should not be like that, right? So that division of English, if people use the U English, then it will be considered high English, correct or standard English. If they are speaking in a rough language, then they consider this non-U, and they just don't like that idea. Some people, for instance, according to your textbook, we have note paper is a non-U note paper, whereas the term writing paper is the U term. Okay. So Ronald, tell me, how do you say now paper? Do you just say paper, or if you use note paper, that means you're non-upper class. If you use a writing paper, and then you're the upper class, right? So do you think it is fair? Do you think it is good to divide based on the class? Now remember, English society has always been dominated by class society. Here in India, we have the caste divided society, but there in England, they have a class divided society. So the upper class, when they speak, especially RP, English around London area, they think that this is the highest form of English. This is the standard English. But now, in the 20th century, many people do not like that idea, and they revolt against it. They rejected the idea. They said this is unfair. They said everyone's got equal chance. All right. And now, it's not written in your book here, but there's even American English, there's Australian English, there is New Zealand English, there is South African English, there's Canadian English, English of India and Southeast Asia. There's a lot of Englishes now spoken around the world. What is standard English now? So that is a big question also now. People are still debating upon it. Okay. Yes or no? All right. So that will be the end of today. I want to end this discussion. I want you to think about these things, okay? The evolution of Standard English. Remember, Standard English is a long line of continuity. It started from the old Anglo-Saxon period or the Old English period through the Middle English period and into the Renaissance and the Reformation, the Commonwealth period, and then later on, the eras followed. Okay, so there's a lot of changes, and people started to purify and protect it, but it looks like it is very difficult. Language is always in a state of flux, always in a state of change, and in the 17th century or in the 17th century, people could not really protect it, even though they tried very hard. This is Standard English. However, um, again, there is a reality that there is a Standard English also, because not every English you hear now also you won't be able to understand. There will be a lot of pronunciation or accent difference as well as grammar difference, and so there should be some sort of uniformity among the intellectuals that we understand, so we can say that the realm or the idea of Standard English may be very wide now. Okay, I just want to ask both of you, since you're the only ones that has come online. So Ronald, after you heard now my lecture, what do you think about Standard English? Do you think there should be an idea of Standard English, or do you think this is just a dream? Do you think it is even possible to talk about Standard English? What do you think, Ronald?
I think it is impossible because there's a lot of people who speak English and it's all different. Suppose the Indian accent is a bit different than the Chinese and the American, so as the Australian. Sir, we can't hear you.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me repeat everything I said. So what I was saying is it may be possible to have Standard English back in those days, Old English period. It might be easy, right? Or even medieval English period. But now, all over the world, people speak English with different variation of dialect and pronunciation and grammar and accent pronunciation. So it is going to be very, very difficult to say standard English. However, at the same time, we need some sort of standard. So the question, it becomes very difficult. What to accept? Okay, Ronald? Back in those days, as I said, it might be possible. People tried, but even Pope also could not do it during that time, Alexander Pope and others. Now, before I end, this is one thing I want to add. In fact, I missed this out. In 1611, there is something very important that happened to English literature. What is that? Ronald, can you tell me? In 1611, one book came out in England that is very important. Hmm? Yes,
I
Ron.
don't know.
Okay. Yes, Jehu. What is the very important book that came out in 1611 in England? You remember? All right. You remember we often said the authorized version of the Bible or the King James Bible, right? That was the year in which the King James version or the authorized version came out. And it is very important. And later on, about a century later, Dr. Johnson also had his first, the first dictionary of English came out, written and, edited and done, everything done by Dr. Johnson. So the English Bible is also going to be very, very important, as we said, even during the Victorian era also. Now, Dr. Johnson's dictionary was very important for the standardization or for getting, standard English into its present shape, because Dr. Johnson uh, it reduced what? There are two things that it did. It reduced a chaotic spelling system. So when that dictionary came out from various dialects of English, he collected and he used the East Midland or that dialect, or that region, London region, the southern England. So it reduced this, it fixed the spelling, different variations of the spellings. He put it into a unified form. And secondly, by distinguishing between reputable and low words. All right, this is something that you have to understand. Dr. Johnson's contribution for the development of standard English is first fixing the spellings, different spellings. He put them in one uniform spellings of words in that dictionary, and people began to use it, and that's how it proliferated. Secondly, uh, it distinguished between reputable and low words. Low words may be slang or regional idioms or words that were used by the base or lower class people, that were people that that were not on a high pedestal in a society. All right. So Mr. Johnson did that. All right. So low words and high words, he's using that, and of course the intelligent people and the educated will always go for the higher words. Okay, so that's the thing that we also did, and ultimately this also became very important later on. Okay, so mm, with that in mind, I want you to read the text again. I think you all have the text, right? Ronald, if you can read the text again, Yes, I'm very sorry that I was out. I got kicked out because of low connectivity. Can you still hear me now, Ronald? All right. How about Jehu? Can you hear me? Good, good. So we're going to end this meeting, this class now. I want you to remember everything that we said tonight in the class lecture, and do your assignment. Read the text again. This is only about 10 pages. Try to understand everything and know the authors mentioned and know what happened in that. So what is the contribution of the in the development of standard English, the Old English period? What happened in the Middle English period? All right, what happened? Right, and what are the regions that are important, what did Johnson's dictionary do, and what are the definitions of standard English by three important persons that we mentioned. Right, and then what happened during the Commonwealth period, who are the people responsible for maintaining the purity of English language, and also in the 18th century, what happened? Uh, who are the people trying very hard to protect and to make a correct English, or to have rules and regulations, okay, like people like Pope and Matthew Arnold. In the 19th century, who are the people, all right, and who I mean, who are the religious, or may not be religious, but literary people, as I said, the Victorians and their Bible. And so that is and of course Alfred Tennyson and William Morris, they are going to be very important. And later years we have U and non-U, upper class and non-upper class English also came into being, and people rejected that idea. Okay, so I want you to remember that. Do you have any question, Ronald, for tonight? Any?
I don't have any question. What?
Okay, Ronald, kindly do you. Right, Jehu? I think it is Jehu who already submitted. Very good. So everybody must submit your assignment on time. Maybe you can do it tonight. All right. All right. So thank you so much. And hope